The Jecod DMP-40 is the Chinese answer to, or perhaps better put, copy of, Ecotech's hugely popular Vortech MP-40, which until now has been the only powerhead you can buy that keeps cables and the motor out of the tank. I've had my copy for a couple of weeks now, so in this video I'll tell you everything you need to know about it, and I'll show you just how well it stacks up against its expensive counterpart. Before we start though, I'd like to thank this video's sponsor, my credit card, which continues to take a battering in the name of all things reefing. Now, I bought my DMP-40 from AliExpress for £152.72, and I had to pay an extra £36.69 in import duty, which gave a total price of £189.41. But when I made this video, I found it listed at £118 and £137 with different vendors, so it's worth shopping around, particularly given you won't have to pay import duty in the UK on anything under £135. Now, that does make price comparison a little bit of an inexact science, but an original gangster Vortech MP-40 costs £420 in the UK, so the Jecod is anywhere between 55 and 70% cheaper than the Vortech, which is a huge difference in price. In terms of the specs, the Jecod claims to put out 20,000 litres per hour and the Vortech claims 17,000 plus litres per hour, but I'll show you how they actually compare in the real world in a minute. While the powerhead I have is the DMP-40, there are other sizes available too. The Jecod DMP-10 is rated at 5,000 litres per hour and the DMP-20 is rated at 9,000 litres per hour. For comparison, the OG Vortech MP-10 sits between those two and is rated at 6,000 plus litres per hour. And there's also the Jecod DMP-30, which is rated at 15,000 litres per hour. But there is no Jecod equivalent to the behemoth Vortech MP-60, which is rated at a whopping 34,000 plus litres per hour. Now, I've already done an unboxing on the Reef Talk Extra channel, but in short, the build quality and design on the Jecod is pretty average, and perhaps unsurprisingly, it doesn't compare favourably to the Vortech MP-40. The main practical difference in the design though is that the Jecod has both magnets and suction cups to stick it to the glass, whereas the MP-40 just has magnets. The Jecod is rated for glass thickness up to 21mm as a result, whereas the OG MP-40 is only rated up to 19mm, and so far I'm finding the Jecod grips more firmly to my 19mm glass than does my MP-40. In terms of the physical size though, the Jecod is a fair amount bigger than the Vortech. It looks fine on my 6-foot tank, but it'll probably look a bit bulky on tanks that are 3 feet or shorter. And the control boxes also highlight the difference in design and build quality, and frankly the Jecod feels a bit cheap and nasty by comparison. Again though, it's totally fine, and the only thing that really matters with the control box is that there's no port for a battery backup, unlike with the Vortech. Now, there are ways of DIYing battery backups of course, but I love the simplicity of the Ecotech battery backup, which is just plug and play, so it's a shame Jecod didn't follow suit, and that's the one big miss for me. Ultimately though, while I can't yet tell you how the DMP-40 will hold up long term, Jecod has a good reputation for reliability generally, and I've had very few problems with the dozens of Jecod pumps I've bought over the last 10 years. Turning to the app then, and I do find it a little bit weird on the Jecod. For example, when you set up a tank, it calls it an aquascape, not a tank. It uses the word linkage instead of sync to describe the sync or anti-sync modes, and you have to long press to select anything instead of just tapping. But apart from those quirks, it's actually really good. It has 3 flow patterns to choose from, plus a constant speed mode that nobody will use, and you can set different modes at different intensities throughout the day, including a feed timer if, for whatever reason, you want to pause your pumps at the same time every day. And when you log in to check your program, there's a little arrow that points towards the time it's at, so you can see which flow mode is currently in action. The app is really simple, the colours and layout look great, and it's Bluetooth not Wi-Fi, which is all you need for a powerhead. Now, I have had one random issue though, in that the app occasionally flashes up a warning that says controller under voltage. The power supply specs look fine to me, so I don't think I've been sent the wrong one, and the pump seems to be working properly, so for now I'm just ignoring it, although that is the sort of thing that I would just email Ecotech customer service about, whereas I can't do that so easily with Jecod. The flow patterns offer a good bit of variety and will do just as good a job as the MP-40 when it comes to growing coral. But the Jecod does have a party trick that the MP-40 doesn't, and that is what Jecod calls sine mode. In sine mode, the DMP-40 will create a standing wave that looks absolutely awesome and sways your corals gently from side to side. I've never managed to achieve the same effect with the Vortex, and while I'm sure it is possible, it's really easy to do it with the Jecod, and all you need to do is set it to sine mode then turn the frequency down. I absolutely love the effect this gives, and I could watch my corals swaying back and forth all day long. Now the Tunzi Wavebox achieves a similar effect, and that powerhead comes with a warning that it will put extra stress on the seams of your tank. So if you do use sign mode, just beware of the risk, and I would personally only run it for an hour or two per day at most to coincide with when I'm in my living room. But man, it looks so cool, and it's my single favourite thing about this powerhead. This is my first Jecod powerhead though, so let me know in the comments if you can do the same thing with normal Wi-Fi Jecod powerheads. In terms of how much flow it puts out, all of the clips you've seen so far are of one Jecod DMP-40 running on my 6 by 2 foot tank, with all powerheads and the return pump turned off. It's a little hard to accurately compare it to my OG MP-40s because they're all several years old now, and in these clips the pumps are at different heights, with the Jecod a good 6 inches lower in the tank. Now I've stared at these clips for absolutely ages and I still can't split them. I'm sure one is probably slightly more powerful than the other, but to all intents and purposes they look the same to me, so if one is more powerful, it's marginal, and so I'm calling it a tie. And my main takeaway from this is that they're both very impressive in terms of flow, particularly given this coral is at the far end of my tank, 5 feet away from both powerheads, and is still getting plenty of movement. Now in terms of the noise levels, again I can't really do a fair comparison because of the age of my Vortex. Unsurprisingly in my test, the brand new Jecod was quieter than the 7-year-old Vortex, and while I can't honestly say what the difference is when comparing like for like, my impression is that the Jecod is probably quieter than the Vortex, and I do find my Vortex a bit noisy above 80%, especially in long pulse mode. And for what it's worth, bearing in mind how difficult it is to get audio levels across on a YouTube video, here are the sound clips I've recorded. So with all of that being said then, what are my overall thoughts? Well, it's fair to say I'm really impressed with the Jecod. It kicks out a ton of flow, the app is easy to use, it's quiet, and that standing wave feature is just so cool. However, the lack of a plug and play battery backup option is a big miss for me, and I also personally love that the Ecotech Mobius app can turn off all my flow and at the same time set my AI blade lights to full blues at the touch of one button. And I use that feature all the time when I need to get my hands in the tank or when I need to take top-down photos and videos. So for me personally, the OG Vortech is still the superior powerhead. But despite that, I'm seriously impressed with the Jecod, and I think it represents incredible value for money. And if my reasons for going Ecotech aren't important for you, the Jecod is at least as good, if not better, than the Vortech, all for a third of the price. So Ecotech should see this as a shot across the bows. While it's great that the Vortech has proven to be very popular and reliable over the years, the design hasn't changed in almost a decade, and yet the price has gone up from $350 US in 2015 to $470 US in 2024. Now to be fair to Ecotech, that's actually marginally cheaper when you adjust for inflation, but the R&D costs are long since paid for on these pumps, and I've always felt that the Vortech line of powerheads should be going down in price, not up. While it's probably wishful thinking to expect the Vortex to come down in price now, the Jecod DMP line is a genuinely capable alternative, and the Vortex no longer have that particular section of the market cornered. And the only thing I'll say about the Jecods is that they still have the same limitations as the Vortex in that you can't angle them up or down like a normal powerhead, and in terms of pure performance for the benefit of your fish and corals, they're no different to any other Jecod powerhead. So while I do think they're a cool bit of kit, they're still firmly in the want not need category, and you should always ask yourself if you'll get more joy spending your money on corals or equipment. Now the Jecod DMP pumps have caused a bit of a stir in the hobby, so I'm really interested to know what you guys think, so let me know down in the comments which you prefer, the OG Vortech MP-40 or the Jecod DMP-40. And of course if you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe for next time, and until then, happy reefing.